across all of Inca. So it's not how we run our teams, it's how we would like to deal with security and privacy in the full context of the organization. And this being human-centric and value-driven, essentially the way we can scale our capability is to make sure that every single coworker at IKEA has a part to play in that operating model. Now, some, of course, have a bigger part to play than others, but the important part here is that we are inclusive with everyone. So this is core, and also recognizing that for IKEA, we have always put people as our number one strength, right? And security tends to go the other way around and say, if we could remove all the users, it would be super easy, and then security would be nice. But rather recognizing that strength that IKEA has through its core values and the culture we're building, to actually leverage that to do security and privacy right across the organization. So making them part of the solution rather than seeing them as part of the problem. We want to drive informed, conscious decisions on risk. And essentially that's about being able to create a transparency around security and privacy, being able to orchestrate different types of events so that we get them to the right place at the right time, so that the smart people of our organization can take informed, conscious decisions. And here is a heavy responsibility on us from a security point of view to make sure that the information we deliver has a high level of quality. In the end, what we want to try to achieve is digital trust. So the customers that are visiting us online, as well as in the store and whatnot, to trust us. And here we're going to have a lot of talks, I think, later on privacy part. It's a super important part of this, right? Because if you as a customer is going to shop with us, that understanding of how we deal with your information and what we do with it and how we store it and so on is critical, and that we make sure that it's always secure. The last one in this is excellence in execution, and it's also a testament to our cost consciousness part in it. We also need to be efficient, right? The expectation of IKEA is to deliver a low price to the many people, and it needs to be affordable and sustainable and so on. And that means so that also from what we are doing, it needs we need to have a high level of efficiency in the work we do to make sure that it's a cost-conscious effort that we're making. There's also a bit of a pet peeve of mine in this, that a lot of, if you're familiar with maturity models in security and privacy, they tend to sort of go to a level where state-of-the-art companies needs to be. And I'm not so fond of this set of doing it, because it invites you to aim for some sort of mediocrity. Because of course there are companies out there that are in need of a higher level of security than IKEA is. You have defense industries and so on and so forth that will lock down things to a much greater extent than we have to do. But the mindset I'd like our teams to work with is that we're selective in choosing the things we need to do in order to deliver digital trust for our customers. And for the things that we choose to do, we're aiming for excellence. So it's a little bit of a different mindset, but getting the team and the people to actually aim for every day when we're coming to work, we're doing our utmost to reach a level of excellence in the things we choose to do. So if we do click there. So one of the things we've done lately is that we've joined up our security and privacy organizations globally for Inca. So the teams and many of the people here in the crowd as well is now working in one single organization. So we're supporting the full Inca scope in a global fashion. And we've set the team up essentially in a few different sub-teams, but to sort of roughly speak into what they are doing, there is one part for sort of steering, where we're defining the strategy where we need to go and how to get there. We have a measuring part that makes sure that everything we are aiming to do, that we are able to measure it and report on the status of it, being able to talk to our board and say the net risk for IKEA is this. We have enabling spaces, and some of them are here and speaking about privacy, for example, today. So essentially, in order to leverage our capability out into a large organization, we set up best practices, toolings, and so on that we can then scale out into execution. And the last part here around execution, essentially how we meet our frontline. And that's frontline within digital, but it's also frontline on the business side of things. So I think I'm going to need to speed up here, otherwise I'm going to run out of time. But so click. I tend to ramble. So a couple of things around this: decoupling risk and engineering ambition. Something also that we're working on to see how we can sort of measure on the things that are good engineering and the qualitative engineering, and then matching that up against risk, rather than necessarily having all that conversation at the same time. So this is an important part in being able to have the right conversations with the right stakeholders at the right time. So click. For those coming out of IT industries, you've probably seen that a lot of things before in waterfall models has tended to be to set up various types of gates where you sort of say yes or no, you may proceed to the next step. That's the scenario we're leaving behind, because the product teams out there today, they're working in agile ways with really fast cadence of deliveries. And when we cannot do that type of gated control, which from a security point of view tends to work pretty well, but it's simply not possible at that rate, we need to replace it with something else. And that requires a high level of visibility and transparency into everything that's going on. So you rather can monitor it and very quickly act on something that is out of line with what you're expecting. Click. Aligning risk and reward, a little bit back to the same thing here, but it's also the same with these teams that are empowered to drive the outcomes that they're set up for. We need to be able to then also make sure that they truly understand that if you own all of these positive outcomes of your deliveries towards business, you also need to own the risks. You cannot just say that we own the cool part and security does the bad part. You need to, if you want to operate in that model, you need to take full ownership of both of them. Then of course you have us there to support and engage and make sure that sort of things stay somewhat within certain boundaries. Click. Build versus buy is also quite an interesting thing, and this comes back to the digital transformation. We're choosing engineering as a core competence. We're building more of our touch points with our customers, where we think we can do better than others in creating that context. But it goes for security as well, right? Some of the things we do are really contextualized to IKEA and IKEA's way of working, and that's where we are going to choose to build as well. We're never going to end up building an endpoint protection system, but we may very well build an orchestration engine for how we make sure we can sort of get the right information to the right place. Click. Then, Panos, go. I think you should be over here so that the screen sees you over here.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to talk about the Cyber Jedi Academy. And the Cyber Jedi Academy is the security training program that we offer for our product engineers. And just to mention something again, at IKEA, our core strength is our people. And in the context of securing digital products, the product teams are our heroes there. So we need to make sure that we enable them and empower them in order to build secure and resilient software. But if we take a step back now, let's see why we have created the Academy and what kind of challenges we're trying to solve. Next slide, please. So, securing digital products is a very hard problem. And in order to understand this, we need to understand that security isn't a binary thing. There is no such a thing like a product is secure or it's not secure. But instead, it can be seen as the result of our efforts trying to minimize the set of potential vulnerabilities that exist in a product. And this comes with several challenges. So challenge number one, we have increased complexity and exponential growth of technologies and systems involved in digital products. We are moving from on-prem to the cloud, new ways of developing software, the DevOps mindset, containerized applications, Kubernetes, and the list goes on. So a question that arises here is, how do you keep up with learning about those technologies? And how do you make sure that you understand them in order to make them secure? Challenge number two, it's very often the case that the security people and the product people, they speak different languages. For instance, it could be the case that for a security engineer, whatever he suggests as a best practice for securing a product may not fit the way that the product team develops software. And then we can have this unfortunate situation there where the product team would see security as something that slows them down, and then they would choose to turn their back to security. And this is where the Cyber Jedi Academy comes into place. Next slide, please. So the Cyber Jedi Academy is both a learning path and a community which brings together cyber engineers and product teams in an environment where they can learn about security, but it also acts as a communication bridge where both those parties they can communicate and settle down on the ways that security has to be built into digital products. So this doesn't only allows us to solve the challenges that I talked before, but it also allows us to scale security. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the learning content that we have in the academy. Next slide, please. So most of the content is around the secure software development lifecycle, and the secure software development lifecycle, or SSDLC, as it's known. It has to do with all the processes, knowledge, tools, and methodologies that one has to work on in order to build secure digital products throughout the entire life cycle. And if you are familiar with this DevOps sign, so this is the way that SSDLC is depicted as this infinite loop in the DevOps world. So starting from the very beginning of a digital product, we teach them around privacy requirement and privacy principles. We teach something that is called threat modeling. So threat modeling is a process where you basically take the architecture diagrams of a digital product, and then you start brainstorming of what could go wrong in terms of security, and then you need to think about potential countermeasures so you can avoid ending into this situation that something gets compromised in your application. And then we're moving on to other things once we start developing code. So secure coding patterns and how we can avoid common software vulnerabilities, managing secrets in the best way, and how to keep them confidential, rotating credentials, etc. And we also teach them automated security scanning tools and how to update their dependencies in an efficient way. Once the product is a little bit mature, we're looking at penetration testing and application recovery plans. And here we're not only talking about the penetration testing as a concept, like what it is and how they can get a penetration test, but we actually have activities where they have to exploit vulnerabilities by themselves in order to understand them. So they act as penetration testers. And then once the product is ready for deployment, we're looking at how to configure it securely, for instance, deploying it to GCP or other cloud providers. And then once the product is up and running, we're looking at how to monitor it and see if anything wrong has happened and how to report this responsibly and how to react to this. Next slide, please. So how we are delivering the content? Well, the learning path has 4 different learning modules, and the first module is more or less about fundamental topics of security, and we're also looking at a high-level overview of what I showed to you before, whereas later on we move on and discuss about efficient strategies for patching, and we also have them to experience how to use those tools and integrate them into their pipelines. The learning modules have 2 modes, let's say. So one of them is self-paced learning. So they have to do a lot of reading and some exercise, let's say. But we also have a group mode where they have to get together with their colleagues in the product team and do something together. For instance, threat modeling, it's something that they do for the real product and they have to do it together. And then we have the community part, which consists of two different things. We have the hands-on events where both the security community and the product teams come together, and many times we change roles. For instance, when we try to teach them threat modeling, we have an application that we made, the architecture of it, and we play the role of the product teams, and they have to play the role of the security teams, and they have to do the threat modeling. And other times they have to wear their black hats, and then we're doing hacking activities, and they have to solve several challenges where they have to exploit some common vulnerabilities. And recently we are going to try something new, a privacy event where they will have to do privacy assessments of real-world applications. Then we have the community meetings. Each Friday for 1 hour we get together. There's usually a presentation about a specific topic, usually from a security person. But many times we just hold open discussions. Maybe security team will come and they will present their work, and they could get some feedback to see if this is a good fit for how teams develop software, etc. And finally, we have third-party learning platforms where we basically give them access to content that we do not develop by ourselves, but they can go and do some learning outside of the CyberJedi Academy. Next slide, please. So, the question is now, have we hit the target? Is the Academy successful? Are we done? Next slide, please. I'm just gonna show you this chart here, which shows the number of Jedis that we have in the Academy over time. So the program has been running for a little bit more than a year now. And in the first half of 2021, we had around 50 Jedis. And we finished in 2021 with 175, where right now we are sitting at almost 280 Cyber Jedis. So we see rapid growth in terms of adoption of the Academy. That makes us very happy. But we are also aware of some things that we need to improve. So we are constantly working on the content, and we're getting feedback from the product teams on how to introduce new material that fits the way that they work. And this is because, as I said in the beginning, one of the biggest challenges is to keep up with all those technologies. And if you want to build one of the best security training programs, you need to keep evolving. You cannot be static. And this is where the Academy is heading. I'm very confident about that, but I'm also excited with the challenges that we're going to face along the way. Yeah, if you want to learn more about the Academy, you can find me after this talk, and now we'll hand it back to PG for some final outcomes.
Thank you. This is one of our most exciting programs that we are running, and the success of it has been good so far. And I think, so we can do click. I have this on mine as well, and click again. So on the HumanCentric side of this, as Pano said, over 250 Jedis. And I think key here is the togetherness. And it comes back to the things I was talking about earlier as well, right? These are empowered teams. It's not either or. We've had a lot of discussions around first line, second line, third line of defense and all of these things. But at the end of the day, we're in it together. So and this is where we need to find that middle ground, right? So security can be at the table in the discussions around how do we deliver for the best of IKEA. And that's not stepping back and just advising, and it's not going in and saying, no, 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 this is the way you do it. It's a dialogue, and it's together. That's also how we've tried now to set up our organization. So into our digital organization is set up in something we call domains. So we have customer domains, inventory logistics, fulfillment, and so on. And we've set up dedicated security teams and privacy teams into each of these domains. So there's a cyber engineering manager that connects into the leadership team of the domain and works together with them to figure out what's the right staffing, what's the right strategy for operationalizing security and privacy into this particular domain. Because we also need to recognize that domains are quite different. Some are heavy on the build side of things and will write a lot of code and create software themselves, whereas other domains are more heavy on off-the-shelf products that they buy and configure for IKEA use. And the way we do security and privacy in those will differ, which means that the competence and knowledge we need in each of these teams is not the same everywhere. Many of the other parts we're working on here is standardizing. So I see sort of the digital foundation, the security foundation we're trying to do is to create components of quality that can be leveraged by the organization. So you probably heard of security controls. There are tons of them. There are different frameworks for them. We're trying to standardize around NIST's cybersecurity framework. But we, as IKEA stopped publishing the catalog for with all our furniture and whatnot in, we stole the name with pride. So the control catalog that we have is now called Katalogen. The idea being able to take that a step further, right? So it goes all the way from this is the high level idea of what you need to do into this is an implementation recommendation. And if you use this standard component, it will be covered for you. And that way we can use this as Lego blocks when we're building out other things. We're working on creating a cyber journey. So for these teams that largely run themselves, right, we need to create a clear journey for them. They don't necessarily always stay on it. They might have their own bypasses on different parts of it, but sort of the general waypoints on that journey needs to be the same. Again, coming back to that need of visibility, we need to understand how are we looking risk-wise as a corporate, as an enterprise, even if each individual team may do things a little bit differently. Freedom with responsibility, I think I've spoken about. So big parts in this is sort of driving the human centricity part of it. The other is sort of where we can point to different things where we will actively drive risk reduction, right? So we can turn into something measurable over time. And we can see from this where we set these cyber engineering teams in place, we've come a little bit far in the different domains, but where it's been established for a while, we can see that we have large reductions in the number of vulnerabilities that are present in the products, because we're engaging the team to actively work with this on a day-to-day basis. We're getting more and more of our tools integrated into the different CI/CD pipelines, trying to put this into engineering portals and whatnot so that you can template everything. Because security will always at some point be some form of overhead. But one of our main tasks is to make sure that that overhead is as small as possible. Because basically the trade-off is that overhead versus the risk reduction of getting rid of those problems that it is in there. So if we're not doing a good job and the overhead is huge from doing security, well then we're actually harming the business more than we're helping it. We can also see, so this may be more into the details of it, but we're running, I think you mentioned responsible disclosure. So if you're looking at something IKEA digital in any shape or form and you're finding something that isn't working as it's supposed to, there's a link on IKEA.com where you can go in and you can report this. And if you have a valid finding of something, you may actually also get a small monetary reward for that. But this is something we're then actively managing, and we're managing it for IKEA globally. So this covers that IKEA scope of all the franchisees and everything that I was touching on early on. We won't necessarily fix everything. We will route sort of findings to the different franchisees and whatnot. But a lot of this comes back to Inca where we work. And our program on HackerOne is one of the most highly rated ones. And we can also see that this structure of doing things gives us much faster lead times. I don't know the technical part of the audience here, but we had a very big vulnerability that came out in early parts of the year in Log4j, which essentially affected a large part of the global internet infrastructure. And this came in part of code that we were building ourselves. It came in bought programs and whatnot. So it needs to be fixed very widely across the enterprise. And this is one of the things that challenges large enterprises massively in dealing with. And we can see where we now have this structure in place with our cyber engineering teams. We have an ability to spread the information out and get some sort of all clear message back from the different domains. We don't need to know all the details, we just need to know that the right people knows and they are dealing with it. So we can see that we are reducing the risks considerably for the organization when we're dealing with it in this way. So I think that takes me to the end of this. So there's click, and I think this is a message you wanted to give along.
Yeah, so after lunch at 1, we have a capture the flag competition. If you don't know what capture the flag competition is, it's basically a set of security challenges that you need to solve, and once you solve, you capture a specific piece of text, and this is called the flag, and then you're getting some points for this. So if you want to practice your hacking skills and become a Jedi for a day, you can come and join us at 1, and we're gonna have some fun all together. So.
Nice, thanks. And click, I think that takes us to questions.
You need to bring your own, yes.
How do you measure success at the Jedi Academy Award?
Mm.
You know it's working.
So recently we have built the Jedi Analytics Insights application, and we are measuring different things. For instance, total registrations, total completions, how long does it take for someone to complete the academy, and some other statistics there. But we are actually looking into seeing, for instance, if there is a correlation between being a Jedi and building secure software from taking, for instance, results from the static analysis tools that we have, etc. So do teams that they have a cyber Jedi introduce less vulnerabilities? Are they more secure? But we are still working on that. But we have a platform which collects analytics both for measuring the success of the program as a learning path, like if people are satisfied with the content, but also to see what kind of impact it has in terms of security.
So, I mean, this is a hard problem, right? The first level metrics of completion rates and so on and so forth, those are easy to measure. But that's another thing in this, right? You mentioned threat modeling as one of the things that this Jedi's gets to facilitate with their teams. And it's one of the things we're pushing most heavily for, not necessarily only because of the outcome of the threat models are things you should be working with to fix, but also that the threat model is facilitating a conversation with the team about thinking about security and privacy in these contexts. So it gets the... Because many of the things we are trying to get the teams to do aren't rocket science. They're not necessarily hard problems, but if you're not aware of the different things that can go wrong and why you should be working with them, you'll often prioritize your time somewhere else. And threat modeling is a fantastic exercise in getting the teams to think about and talk about security in the context of their own product, which then leads into realization that we need to work with X, Y, and Z in order to secure our product. So there's a sort of a chain of events that happens that may often start from the Jedis that then leads into a maturity journey for the different teams. That is a fantastic question. So Panos manager, the software security manager we have, is an enormous Star Wars fan. So when I charged him with setting up a champions program, these programs are usually called champions programs in software security. He thought he'd try to make it sort of a little gamified and more exciting and whatnot, and appeal to engineers. So he Star Wars branded the entire concept. So you start off as a Padawan, and then you can move yourself up into becoming a Jedi Master eventually when you complete all the modules of the program. So it's just his fascination with Star Wars.
can join the academy whenever you like. Either if you're building like a new product or you're already part of a team that has a product. You sign up for the course, and then the community part and the events, they are kind of repeat every 6 months. And then we also have some new talks and topics that we discuss. But anytime you can just join. So it's not specific for a product.
Well, so again, back from the gated versus visibility, and we've launched it openly. So the first set of Jedis that joined in was basically the ones that was most interested in the topic. Then we're sort of looking at this governance aspect of it. Where should it be mandatory, or for what purposes and whatnot? And our most mature domain by now, they've said that every product team should have a Jedi. That poses some additional challenges because some of the engineers that then join hasn't necessarily joined because it was a super interest of theirs, but rather because their manager told them that we need a Jedi in the team, so you need to join there. And that poses a different type of training problem, right? But this is something we're exploring, and it might not necessarily become uniformly. So that domain set it up with one in every team, and a dedication of at least 15% of that person's time was dedicated to security. But again, this is things we are sort of exploring. But an ambition is, of course, that we will have a Jedi in every team eventually.
It's a more of a trial and error process. So you keep trying things and then you see how they work. I wasn't there when they initially started the program, but I think they did a pilot with a set of engineers, and then they got feedback from that. So I think getting feedback consistently and be engaged with the community all the time. You need to have the events, you need to bring people together, you need to think about how to make the content engaging. And that's why, I mean, we focus a lot on those hands-on events. Because the feedback many times that we get is that, you know, this part has a lot of reading, so we're trying to transform it into something very interactive. So I think like focusing on this part would be a good place to start, and then you see how it goes.
I think that's with the staying engaged with it. I think, as you said, super important is these activities that we're doing training on are actual activities they can bring back and do on their own teams, so that they can see the benefit of doing it in the context of their own deliveries. I think that is probably one of the key parts to it. It's also about how we sell it, of course. So it needs to sell itself to engineers, but then also being able to sell it to the management of, for example, in our case where we're targeting the domains, to sell it to the management so that there's an understanding from above, so the conversation falls into the teams that this is a prioritized activity. Because again, the people that we actively want to engage in the program, if they're getting basically the message that no, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be delivering on feature X tomorrow, then it's going to fail. So it's that combination of having a content that sells itself to, in this case, the engineers, and getting the management buy-in that it's important. Good question. Anyone else? If not, then big thank you for your time, and thanks for listening.